Lab. My name is Phil, and today we're doing intro to Mac Catalyst. As you may or may not know, Mac Catalyst is a set of APIs that allows you to port your existing iOS apps and specifically iPadOS apps to macOS. And the apps that you're going to end up making are still optimized for the Mac, and they're still native. So it's a far better solution than to use stuff like React Native or whatever you might be thinking about um, to create a cross-platform app if you're already using Swift and iOS code base. So I have a project prepared for today. I'm going to share my screen and basically what we have is a colors app that we're building in one of the clouds in the past years. So it's a great iPhone app, and this is why I picked it. There was a lot of things that we could do with it. So here's the app running on the iPhone. We have a bunch of colors here. Each color is named, and when we select a color, we go to a detail view where you can see the color in all its glory, I guess. So you can also create a color. You can move the sliders and see the color in real time, and then you can say save, and it's going to be saved as a new color. So this is not a very complicated app, but it would allow us to demonstrate how to make this app run on macOS and how we can optimize it for the Mac. And basically everything we will do today is not going to take up too many lines of code. It's all very simple and it's all optional. So making your iOS app run on the Mac is as easy as checking a checkbox. It's literally just that. So I'm in the project menu right now in Xcode, and I'm gonna select this Mac checkbox on the colors target. I'm gonna click enable, and I'm just gonna leave everything as is. I might increase the deployment target to macOS 11.0 and make sure that if you're following, you select scale interface to match iPad, at least for now. And then I'm going to select the run destination here to be my Mac, and I'm going to click run. First, I'm going to go to signing in capabilities, and I'm going to change the theme since you need to have a signing certificate to be able to run on the Mac. So let's wait until building finishes. And you can see it already has an icon since our iOS app also had an icon, so there's nothing that we need to specifically change. And here's the app. We made literally 0 modifications, and here it is running as a fully native app on macOS. It behaves just the way you would expect, although it does look kind of out of place. If you consider other desktop apps, you might be imagining like a sidebar, a toolbar, maybe some menu bar features, and things like that. So this is exactly what we'll be working on today. It is absolutely, totally optional for you to do that. I would imagine that if your app is functional on iOS and runs on the iPad, it would also be a pretty good macOS app, and you would be able to pass review for the App Store, and there would be no issues with it. But if you want to maximize your functionality and kind of improve your user experience on the Mac, this is what you need to do. So at first, I'm going to show you just a nice trick with storyboards. So our UI here is implemented using a storyboard. It's not a very complicated UI, so it's a pretty good solution. So you can actually change your view when you're building for macOS or just debugging your UI. You can click right here where it says View As and then the name of the device. And you can click this button that says My Mac and kind of displays that window frame. And here it is. This is exactly the way your app would look like on the Mac. It kind of transformed into this relatively small window. And this is a great way to kind of see how your UI will look like on the Mac. So I want to make a bunch of improvements to this app. And at first, of course, the first thing that you imagine when you think about a desktop app is probably a sidebar. It would be great to have the list of colors on the left, and then the right pane can display the selected color instead of us having to go back and forth between the colors. So this is actually a universal solution. It would work also for an iPad app or an iPhone app that is in landscape mode. So I'm going to use a split view controller. I'm just going to find it in the objects menu and I'm going to drag it. I'm only interested in the split view controller itself, so I'm going to remove all the boilerplate that appeared with it. So I'm going to set this view controller as the initial view controller. And then I'm going to control drag and I'm going to use the list controller as the master view controller. And I'm going to set the detail as the detail view controller. So I think this view controller was called colors. No, this is not the right one, I believe. Yeah, so this is the one that we need. Color detail. So the view controller that displays the individual color that the user selects. So I'm gonna delete the previous connection and I'm gonna set this to the detail view controller of the split view controller. And you can see how the view changes, and this is what would be called master detail. So this is the master view controller that kind of controls what is being displayed currently. And this is the detail view controller that's going to display the individual item that you pick in the master view controller. In the Mac-specific language, this would be a sidebar, and this would be the detail. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this segue. Actually, no, let's just run the app and see what happens. The app crashes because we have an instance variable called color here, and it is course unwrapped. So we might want to just change this to give it a default item. So it's going to be no color selected. And the UI color is going to be .clear. Run this again and see what happens. Yeah, so as you can see, we have our list of colors on the left now, and the detail is empty, obviously, and we still get our view controllers on the left. So now let's delete this connection that goes between the collection view item and the detail view controller. So now we need to make a bunch of changes to make sure that we actually open the colors in the detail view controller instead of the same the same view, because otherwise it wouldn't make any sense having the split view controller if it stays empty all the time. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna say, so first of all, I want to change this because obviously there is not enough space to fit all the colors. I want to have one color on each line, and you can see that here we have a call to collection view layout, and we give it the size of the view. However, if we're using the split view controller, the size of the frame is going to be the size of the whole view controller instead of just the master portion. So for that, I'm going to create a new variable called size. I'm going to say CG size, width and height. The width is going to be self.split view controller preferred primary column width. However, if the split view controller does not exist, I'm just going to default to 0. And then the height is going to be view frame dot height. And I'm just going to pass this size. Run it again and see what happens. One thing that you would notice is, first of all, the colors are now displayed in a nice list here. However, if we click on them, nothing happens because we deleted the segue. So now what we want to do is we want to launch our detail view controller from our colors collection view controller. And we can do this by overriding the didSelectItemAdd method for collection view. It's going to start typing and it's going to didSelect. It's going to autocomplete for me. And I'm just going to say, I'm going to first of all instantiate the view controller. I'm going to say let board equals UI storyboard. Kind of the standard stuff if you want to instantiate something from the storyboard. Main bundle null. And I'm going to say let detail vc equals storyboard dot instantiate view controller with identifier. The identifier I'm going to give it is going to be detail. We'll have to change it later in the storyboard. I'm going to say as color detail view controller. Set the color to be the corresponding color from the index path, index path.row. And I'm going to say self.split view controller, if it exists, show the detail view controller. And the view controller is going to be obviously detail VC, and then the sender is going to be self. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to move to the main storyboard, and I'm going to change the identifier for this view controller to detail. Now let's run the app and see what happens. Yeah, I misspelled main. Cool. Now we select a color and it's displayed on the right. So now it looks more like an actual Mac app. But the next thing I want to do is to add a thing that is very specific to the Mac that every user probably expects, and it's the context menus. So probably if you've used anything on the Mac, you've used context menus. So if you right-click on stuff, you get those pop-up menus that allow you to choose what to do with that option. So here, if I right click on anything, nothing happens. And I'm thinking that our users might expect us to have that functionality. And this is also possible with Mac Catalyst. So the method that I'm looking for in the collection view delegate protocol is it's called context menu. View config. I don't know why it's not offering me auto completion for this. Index path. Then I'm going to return UI context menu. So actually, I'm probably not going to write all of that. I'm going to copy it from the implementation that I have here, and I'm just going to walk through it for the sake of saving time. So basically what this method does is for iPadOS and macOS, it allows you to create a context menu for any item in the collection view. So it returns a UI context menu configuration. And with that configuration, you can add so-called actions. On the Mac, it's going to be menu items. And you basically just return an array of those items. So I created 3 UI actions. The first is going to be called open. It's going to have an icon that this is not displayed on the Mac, but it will be useful for an iPad. Then I'm going to call the didSelectItem method since we just implemented it. I'm going to have a duplicate action that would duplicate the color. And I'm going to have the delete action that's not going to do anything for the sake of saving time. But if you are interested, you can implement the color deletion functionality. So let's see. I'm going to right click on this. And here I have my menu. I can say open. It just opens it. Let's try to duplicate it. And here it is at the end of our list. So that was easy enough. I think it was like 30 lines of code, which is definitely not that bad for such a nice piece of functionality that would be actually shared between macOS and iOS. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add some buttons. So let's say we decided that our detail view controller is too boring and we want to add some more functionality. So I'm going to change the bottom space here. I'm going to add a horizontal stack view. This for now, and I'm going to add a couple of buttons. Let's say we want to add 3. I'm going to navigate to my stack view now, and I'm going to change the distribution to fill equally, and I'm going to change spacing to maybe like 30. And then feel free to assign any names to the colors. Let's say copy, and then maybe share, and maybe like basically everything that you would want to do with your color once you're viewing it in the detail view controller. And let's see how that looks. And here we select our colors and we have those 3 buttons. But if you're familiar with kind of this style of the macOS operating system, you will notice that buttons usually have a very distinct style that is familiar to every user of the operating system. And here we just have the iOS style buttons. And I think at some point that might be a problem, and it is definitely a user experience problem. But there's actually a really easy solution to this. We can go here and we can select optimize interface for Mac instead. So this is basically as easy as selecting an option from a drop-down menu. Let's run the app again. And here we have it. Of all, because we have more space here, it's going to kind of put 2 items on the sidebar. But we can also see that the buttons are now displayed as the native macOS buttons. And we didn't need to do anything with it. So we just get that behavior for free, basically just for selecting this option instead of Match for iPad. And the next thing I probably want to do for this app is add a nice toolbar. It is very typical for any macOS app to have a toolbar, kind of a set of functions that you might be able to access from anywhere in the app. Xcode here is a great example. We have all these toolbar items that are accessible from anywhere. And I kind of want to match that style. And I want to do it as easily as possible. So I'm going to use the delegate pattern to implement this. So I'm going to add a file here, and I'm going to call it toolbar. This is actually the pattern that Apple recommends we use when we're working with toolbars or menu items on the Mac. And you'll see why a little later. And again, for the sake of saving time, I'm just going to copy it over, and I'm going to kind of explain everything as I go. So here we have our toolbar delegate, and it conforms to NS toolbar delegate. Basically, this is a couple of classes that are exposed to UIKit from AppKit that are only accessible to us when we're running on the Mac. So this does not exist on the iPad, and this has to be Mac specific. So there is actually a very convenient way that we are using here to make sure that the code only runs on the Mac. So if you can see #if here, and it checks for a target environment to be Mac Catalyst. So this is what is called a preprocessor directive. So the code inside the directive will only be included in the binary, will only be compiled if we're trying to compile for the Mac platform. So as opposed to a regular if statement, if we're trying to compile our app and run it on an iOS device, this code will not be compiled and will not be included in the binary at all. So this is a great way to include Mac-specific code without increasing potentially size of your binary or your compile times for iOS. So there are a couple of methods that we need to know about when using NS toolbar delegate. First of all, we want to provide a default toolbar to the user. So this is the toolbar that the app will display by default. And here I have toggle sidebar, flexible space, basically a separator between the items. Show colors. So these three items are provided by the system, and I didn't need to do anything to implement them. So that is pretty convenient, and I will talk about these later. And then I'm going to implement this toolbar item for item identifier method that optionally returns an NS toolbar item. So basically here, if we are trying to create one of those system toolbar items, I'm just going to create a toolbar item and with a specific identifier, and the system is going to handle the rest for me. And I'm going to return. And obviously, we return from this switch statement immediately. But then with these two custom items, I'm going to create an item myself. So first of all, I'm going to do the same thing as I did with the system item, but then I'm going to assign an image, a label, an action, and a target. So images and labels are pretty self-explanatory, but let's look at the target. So for example, this new color item will call new color method. And here we have it in an extension. Obviously, if you're using selectors, they have to be marked as Objective-C. And we have basically just two methods that don't do anything currently. So now that we have our toolbar functionality, let's make sure that we actually use it and that we actually tell the system where to look to find our toolbar code. So I'm going to use the scene delegate functionality that has been introduced in iOS 13. This is a more modern way to handle app lifecycle events because it allows us to handle multiple windows, what iOS calls UI window scenes. You can optionally use app delegate for this if you have an older app, but I would recommend to transition to scene delegates because they make working with Windows on macOS and iPadOS extremely easy because of this abstraction. So I'm going to delete this line of code, and I'm going to say if let window this window. Basically, I need to make sure that I have my window. Let window scene equals scene as UI window scene. Basically, gonna cast it. And this is when I want to check for the platform. So I want this code to only be available on macOS. I'm going to say Mac Catalyst here. Obviously, I'm going to close it with an end if. And here inside, I'm going to say let toolbar equal NS toolbar. You can try to write this code on iOS as well, and you'll be able to see that the system will not allow you to do that. So it will not recognize NS toolbar as a valid class because it's only included if you're running on a macOS target. I'm going to say toolbar.delegate self and toolbar display mode. Only. That's the default option, but just making sure. If let title bar equal window scene. So this is basically what I've been calling the toolbar all along. The system calls it a title bar. Basically, this menu bar on top that kind of allows you to add custom items that are accessible anywhere in the app. I'm going to say title bar dot toolbar, so it's going to contain our toolbar. I'm going to say title bar dot toolbar style was automatic, just making sure that it switches between light and dark mode and stuff like that. And the next thing I'm going to do is outside of this, if let's call it split window root view controller as UI split view controller. Basically, we know this is going to be a split view controller because we just changed it in our storyboard ourselves. I'm going to say split dot primary background style, and I'm going to set it equal to sidebar. I'm going to go to our main.storyboard, and here I'm just going to change the background color to no color, and I'm going to show you what it does in a second. Oh. So let's see, MS toolbar for delegate. I don't think we need to implement anything specific for this. Actually, we might have to. Yeah. So basically, the toolbar delegate wants us to give it something that would handle the toolbar functionality, kind of like creation methods and the content. So obviously we just created our toolbar delegate, so let's create an instance of it. And that should work. Run the app and see what happens. So as you can see, a bunch of things just changed. First of all, we now have one column. And another nice thing is that now this whole left side is just one uniform translucent piece of UI. So instead of just being a window with a title bar, we have this nice macOS Big Sur style sidebar, and it's actually going to be translucent. So we just did it in one line of code here. But let's see what actually happens here. Now we have our title bar here. And we have our buttons that actually have the desired style. And you can see that when you scroll, this actually works as a uniform piece of UI. So it doesn't need to, we don't need to do anything specific to make that happen. However, we don't see any toolbar items yet. And the reason is that we need to retain this object because it gets released. So let's say toolbar delegate, and then I'm going to set it here. And let's run the app, and that should work now. So let's go through our title bar and see what it does. So first of all, this is the system implemented item that is called show sidebar, and it'll basically show and collapse the sidebar for us. We don't need to implement anything. This is a color menu. It opens kind of a system color pane. Again, we didn't need to write a single line of code for this. And these are our two custom items. And what I want to be able to do, at least in this session, is to launch this view controller from this button. So I want this button to be accessible from anywhere, and I want to get rid of this iOS style toolbar and just be consistent. And again, this is a bunch of macOS specific code. We didn't change anything for iOS or iPadOS. They would still run just fine. So I'm going to navigate back to my toolbar delegate here, and I see that here in the new color method, we already have the notification that is going to get posted when the user selects a toolbar item. Basically, this is the action method, so it's going to be executed whenever the user presses on the toolbar item. So what I'm doing here is I'm posting a notification named new color tapped. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my colors collection view, and I'm going to say notification center dot default add observer, and I want the one that uses the block. So the notification name, let's go back and see what it was. It was new color tapped. I'm just going to copy and paste it here. So the object is going to be nil. Just let's let it run on the main queue and double click on this. So I don't need the notification itself. So underscore, I'm going to weakly capture self. Then I'm going to say self. And then what was our method for presenting the new view controller? So it was did tap create color. And it requires a sender, so I'm just gonna put this as an optional, and then I'm gonna pass nil in here. And obviously, the good thing to do here is to obviously remove the observer when self gets deallocated. But again, this will not do anything, just optionally maybe cause a memory leak at some point. Did disappear. I'm going to overwrite that, and I'm going to call super.view did disappear. Animated, and before that, I'm going to say notification center dot default dot remove observer. And then I'm going to say observer self for name. This was the name and object nil. And just like that, we're done. We can go ahead and test it out. So here we have our toolbar. We click, and the view controller appears. So this is a very Mac-like experience, and it already looks like a fully native app. You really can't tell that it's just an iOS app ported in just maybe 20 minutes. And probably one of the last things I'm going to do here is make sure that the entirety of our app looks like a native macOS app. And so far, these navigation controllers and navigation bars inside them look very out of place, since we already have our toolbar, and it just doesn't make a lot of sense because we can use the toolbar when we're on the Mac. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stay in my collection view controller. I'm going to override the view did appear. I think view will appear will do just fine. Super.view will appear. So what I want to do here is obviously add another directive. Environment list, because I only want to do it on the Mac and not do anything with our UI otherwise, because the navigation bars are perfectly fine when you're using iPhone or iPad. So let's say navigation controller, set navigation bar hidden, through animated. Probably depends on if we're presenting animated, so let's use this flag. I'm just going to copy this go to our detail view controller and just paste it right here. And here, let's back for a second and let's try this again. Yeah, I think I misspelled Mac Catalyst. That's the reason. So now it fully looks like a native macOS app. We select the color. We only have our toolbar here. We have our title bar as well. And we have these native buttons that we can use for whatever the functionality we might come up with. We also have our contextual menus. And basically at this point, this is indistinguishable from an app that you would write in AppKit or in Swift UI. And since we already had this app implemented, this was a very reasonable thing to do to make sure that we also add another platform for our users to use our app from. So this was very easy, and most of iOS frameworks are now also available on the Mac. So Mac Catalyst is a really great solution if you already have an iOS code base. If you have this app written and it supports the iPad, that would mean that you would need to do less modifications to make sure that your app works and feels great for your users on the Mac. And the reverse is true as well, actually. Since our app did not really support iPad before, we implemented this support for both macOS and iPadOS. So now when we run this app on the iPad, it will actually contain this sidebar and the master detail view. So we have actually improved our app for our iOS users while adding a whole new platform for them to use our app on. There's a bunch of other things that you can do to optimize your app further. For example, we could add more toolbar items, including some custom ones, and make sure that the ones that we have here work. And we can also create actions for those items, obviously. We can use more system items if you want to. We can enable, disable them based on whether the detail view controller is currently showing. And obviously another thing that is very typical to the macOS app, such as this, is a menu bar. So currently we have the default menu bar that any out-of-the-box Mac app would have. If you look at the Slack app, for example, it doesn't even have that because it's not a native app. But we got this for free from the system. We didn't have to do anything. It has a bunch of tools for the user to work with text and things like that. But obviously, if we want to support macOS menu bar fully, we could add some custom actions here in the file menu, for example. It could contain the new color option or something like that. And we could add a bunch of other things, maybe like a whole new menu item here in the menu bar to work with the colors. So there's a lot of things that we can do, but Mac Catalyst is a great start to kind of go from a very basic app that does not even look like it belongs on the map, such as what we had here, to something that looks fully native. I mean, you're going to agree probably that this does not look very native to the Mac as opposed to this. I mean, it looks much better. But there is still some things that we can do to improve the experience, and there are a bunch of features that you can look up on the developer website. And they also have recently launched a whole new series of tutorials, interactive tutorials on Mac Catalyst and how to work with it. So if you go to developer.apple.com and search for Mac Catalyst, you would be guided through the process of creation of a fully native Mac app using only iOS code base. So if you're interested and if you have any questions, feel free to ask them right now. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and thank you.